again, the title of the session is Sage Estimating Standard versus Sage Estimating Extended. A little bit about Alliance Solutions Group. We're a construction technology company. We're partners with a variety of construction software related companies, and even just any type of software that a construction company would use. If you have a lot of employees, any type of human resources solutions, anything from accounting to project management, estimating, takeoff, etc. As you can see here on the screen, the green areas are where most of our customers are. We do have over 4,000 active customers, and the blue dots are where we have offices. For anybody that, if you don't know who Sage is, if you're using Timberline Estimating, that's a Sage product. They call it Sage Estimating now, and they're growing. They're continuing to grow. 2 hours. Every hour, a new construction company picks up a Sage software product. And just from Alliance Solutions Group, as far as our approach, we consult. We want to talk with people, talk with you, and just see where you're having issues and bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then just based off of our knowledge and experience, we know which solutions might help you alleviate some of your pain, and then to the end, just getting the software set up correctly and implemented, and getting everybody trained for a smooth go live. Anyway, that's all I was going to cover here, so I'm going to go ahead and make Paul the presenter. And Paul, you should have that right now.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. And again, this is Paul Asnikar, and I'm with Alliance Solutions Group. And most of my work and efforts are focused around the consulting side related to timberline estimating and a lot of the feeder applications that go along with that, meaning like products like OST, PlanSwift, BIM technology, eTakeoff, things like that, integration points to accounting. But we kind of got together here and thought, well, let's put together maybe a half an hour, 40-minute little presentation here on walking you guys through the folks that maybe are currently on standard and some of the differences between moving from standard to extended. So that's kind of my focus today. It's kind of hard in these short little presentations to touch on everything, but what we're going to try to do is keep it around 40 minutes, and then we'll allow some time for, as Tim mentioned, to address some questions that you might have and that sort of thing. And again, it's being recorded, so you're welcome to have the link and go from there. So I'm just gonna, there's a lot of different ways I could go here, but I'm gonna just kind of start out with the basics of some of the upgrades and then get into some of the other meat of it. Initially, if everybody sees my screen here, I'm gonna close this up. Right now I've got the Timberline estimate spreadsheet, and it's blank at this point. And I'm gonna go on the basis that most people have standard, at least right now, and understanding kind of the database spreadsheet concept that Timberline Estimates, Sage Timberline Estimates had over the years. And initially, the first thing that I would say that we could start with is that if our estimate's blank here, there are definitely some big differences between standard and extended. And to start out with, I have a handful of customers. If I come in here and do my takeoff and open up my database, you'll notice here, this is, again, this list can be whatever you want it to be, organized however you want. And just to get some items into the spreadsheet to show you some of the differences between standard and extended, the first thing that is a difference between standard and extended is, you can come in here at this point in any of the applications and come down here and grab marker boards, select, right, slide them in, and start building up your estimate, okay? That's no different. The one thing that is different, though, is that over here on the right is a sort item list by. And extended allows you to have 4 additional sorts of your database. So think of it as being a smart index. You have the ability in standard to sort by description, but you have 4 additional ways to look at your database. Some companies build a database around what makes sense to create the estimate, but then they want to regurgitate it and show it by job cost code. Maybe they want to look at it more by a materials class. Maybe you want to look at it by unit format, level 1 and 2. Now these are definable by the user, I've seen people build and re-index. Let's say that they've bought an estimating database off the shelf, and then they add some of their own items, or maybe there's some of those items they typically work with, whether it's your own custom build or even one that you bought off the shelf. There might be a couple hundred items you guys reuse over and over again, and I've seen people even have a list over here that they can re-index and say top items. And you'll notice, these might be our the way that we're sorting, but you always have access to some of the other items down there that may have not gone to that sort. An example would be, hey, I've got my top items I want to select. Everything down below I still have access to. It's just not my top list. So in this case here, I can still pick any one of these, slide them in, and build up my estimate. And just it gives you the ability to look at it different ways. I know that there's a fair amount of companies above and beyond the top items like to be able to resort it by job cost code, because maybe that's another way that they want to find things. And of course, you can always search and find things by description. That's one of the things. I'm going to take off an assembly or two to get some meat into the spreadsheet, some line items. So bear with me here. I'm going to use a different one here. Good enough. So now we have a few items in the spreadsheet here that we can start working with. One of the other fundamental differences between standard and extended is that we have the ability to do, in standard, probably a better way to start, is you have the ability to come over here and put either a unit cost to the item, change that however you want, and you can have, and even back it up even further and have a production for your line items for people that are doing self-perform work or want to do production-based kind of estimating. But I can come in here and I can change this value, right? And you'll notice over here on the right is my hourly rate. Well, one of the biggest fundamental differences between the two apps is that in Extended you have what they call the crew capability. And the crew capability allows you to back up and have an infinite number of rate structures or rate scenarios. If you notice, if I come back up here to the takeoff, where about 70% of what you need to create the estimate falls in this drop down. If I go to estimate information, right here you get these added tables, and it's the labor and equipment rate tables. And what happens is when I'm over here, I have the ability to choose any kind of rate structure. Now, some companies I've seen, they use prevailing, non-prevailing. If the company has several office locations, they have different rate structures for those office locations. I've seen overtime, straight time, and so what it allows you to do is pick your rate structure, and as you pick your rate structure, that sets in motion the information here as it relates to creating this estimate. So if you notice here, I have now that $33 an hour, and it's coming from not only the $33 an hour, it's coming from that resource. Now, if you notice here, if I open up the magnifying glass, it's just a carpenter. But crews in Timberline can be really two different ways. It could be based on a resource, like in this case a carpenter, and we want to use that resource and have infinite number of rate structures to it depending on our scenario. It's one way. The other way is you can do composite crews, where you can actually build a laborer, a carpenter, a foreman 50% of the time, and you have a blended hourly rate. If you're using the crew capability, you have the ability to do what they call either an average per man or total cost to crew. So you could take a $10, $15, and $20 three rate resources and get a total cost to crew, or you can make it based on a man hour and get an average per man. Regardless, you're still using the crew feature over here. So, and again, it just works just like the spreadsheet that you have in standard. I can come over here and make that 2. I can add more resources if I want, and it doesn't change the database. It's just making that estimate specific. Another thing that kind of filters through with the labor and equipment resource and crew capability is they give you a couple more columns on the spreadsheet, and those are labor rate table and also equipment rate table. I've had customers over the years where they say, hey, when I'm over here in estimating and I start my job and I define my rate structure, most customers go with one rate structure. But then there's also the need maybe to have multiple hourly rates even within the same estimate, and that could be maybe some of the items you want to go with an overtime rate structure. Maybe they're different. I had a customer that worked with multiple customers and on a particular job, and those hourly rate structures different, and they had all their items within one estimate. And over here, now what this allows you to do is you'll notice it defaulted to prevailing because it's coming from the cover page. But if I open this up and go list rate tables, I have the ability to choose another rate table, and it sets in motion. So, not a great example of prevailing, non-prevailing, but certainly a great example of using it would be, I have some items I'm going to go with, maybe I'm working in the evening, and I want to put a higher hourly rate as opposed to our standard rate. So that's a couple things about that. So that's the first major difference. The next major difference is that in standard you have what they call a WBS code, stands for Work Breakdown Structure Code, and you get one. And in extended you actually get a library of 40 that you can build. When I say 40, there's 40 codes that you can build in the library, and within each one of these you have an infinite number of entries, such as CSI code level 1. There might be a whole list of CSI trades. I'm only using one WBS code. But the beauty here is the WBS codes give me several main things. One, if I slide back to the takeoff list, I can utilize those codes, much like in this example here, to resort the database if I want to use the reindexing capability. The second thing is, if you notice here, when I'm creating the estimate, if I come back and take off another assembly, for example, if I click on, I call it the Utah button, it's called Item Takeoff Settings, looks like the state of Utah, but you'll notice in standard you have location in just one of these fields. Well, you notice here I have a lot more entries I can do. And what this does for you from I call it a proactive and reactive way of using these WBS codes. I could come in and say, by the way, this is building A. That feature here is standard or extended. But if I come down here and I say, well, I don't just want to type something in. I want to see if there's a list available. Yeah, put this under interiors, and if I list here, put it under interior construction, hit OK. When I do that, now I have a lot more entries that I can tag along with those, either whether I'm dragging items or using assemblies to drive the spreadsheet. So what it does for us here is, if I went back to that same assembly or a different assembly, come down here to finishes and open up, let's say, a wall assembly. And hit OK, you'll notice now it still funnels everything back into the spreadsheet. But if I come over here to location group or location, you'll notice all that's been coded. Okay? So I have the ability to attach another 39, I guess you could say, WBS codes to a particular item or assembly as I'm using the application. So that kind of opens the door in lots of angles. One, if you notice down here, there's additional tabs that you may not have in standard, you don't have in standard. And what happens too is, if I double click here, I have the ability now to define 4 additional tabs, but I can also take these tabs and go up to 10 levels deep. So in standard you're limited, I believe, at 3 levels. Here you can go up to 10 levels. And so now I can come over here and I can hit my location or group. I can double click and say, gosh, I really want to add the CSI level 1 and 2 in here. And if I hit OK, I can manipulate these tabs lots of different ways. Gee, I want to come over here and I want to move this up as my leader, regurgitate. So there's just a lot of flexibility in how it can present or represent its information in different ways. And again, they're just tabs, so I can change things here, and it updates all the way through. Okay? The WBS codes, another thing that you can do, if you notice, as I was dragging in some items early, and I took off that first concrete assembly, the footing, some of this stuff was automatically put together here. Well, the WBS codes, another fundamental difference between standard and extended here is that if I go back to database and I go into the database settings and I open up WBS, there are 3 different ways I can apply my WBS codes now. It's items, detail, and takeoff. Okay? Takeoff would be like using the location field. Every time I do a project, that location doesn't really need to go into the database like a unit price, because every time it could be building ABC or it could be building 1, 2, 3, north, south, east, or west. That location changes. So the takeoff means it's only available when I click on that Utah button and are able to enter this information here. The detail window and item window, what they do with that WBS code is it allows you, if I go right here and just go right mouse key and go to edit database item, here is the database information about that item. Well, you'll notice one of the things that now can be turned on is WBS, work breakdown structure. And if I open that up, you'll see that I now can nest those WBS codes inside the database. Where that becomes really handy is like you look up here for people that maybe are general contractors that do a lot of design build kind of work. You have the ability now to know, hey, if I'm building up this estimate CSI and the owner wants to see it also in unit format or a systems approach, 9 times out of 10, if I'm dragging an item from a footing, I know it's going to go to a foundation unit format code. So I can nest these, build lists, again, and nest them into the database, just like putting a price in the database. And so when I drag that item in, or it's used in an assembly, it instantly gets populated, and I can drive it now different ways. So, and that really kind of segues into a whole nother area of utilizing the WBS codes. Is that as I'm still here in the spreadsheet, and I know I'm hitting you with a lot of information, but if I click on the Unit Format tab here, now with these definable tabs, I have a couple things I can do. One, if I come over here to, let's say, the location unit format, and I realize, gosh, you know, I mentioned earlier on I can do a proactive coding of the items and assemblies using these WBS codes, but I can also do a reactive now with extended, meaning I can come over here and say, you know, I kind of screwed up here. I really meant to put all those into building A. I could just double click, highlight that, and just drag it up there, and now they all get coded into building A to that unit format. It's called the move copy feature that extended has. Another benefit of that is not only being able to move it, but I can say, you know, I really want to take A, and I want to move it or copy it, and I'm going to say, in this case, I'm going to say I really want to make it a B, because what I did for A is similar to B. So when I say copy, I hit OK, and now I've got an A and a B with their own individual breakdowns. Okay? So that you have the ability to take stuff and either move it or copy it or drag and drop it like I was showing before. And that's true for any of these tabs. Where this becomes a real nice feature too is if I use the tab, you know, and I decided to use the job cost phase, I have a lot of companies that will take that estimate after the award and before they start moving it into job costing and operations and project management, they will manipulate that and move stuff around to get it the way they want before they go interface and drive a budget into accounting. So that's another really nice advantage it has because I have a fair amount of companies that like to manipulate that before they push it over. So that kind of covers a lot of the stuff on the spreadsheet, but also kind of moving towards working in the spreadsheet is a couple things. They've added the ability to do what they call a just column. So if you notice, most of the stuff that you would be doing in standard or extended is to come down here and say, gosh, I want to, you know, make that 500, or I want to come over here and make this, you know, 15 cents, or change this to 8 hours. I'm making changes at a detailed level, okay? In that detail level, I can do that whether I'm in standard or extended. One of the things that extended allows you to do is you can make changes not only at the detail level, but also at the top level. So if I roll this up, and I say, you know, I'm looking at concrete here, and I'm looking at this material amount, or the total cost, I really want to, what if we did this for $125,000? And what it does is it now prorates the detail, and you can see the little red triangle is that it tells you what you've made an adjustment for. Well, I can not only just start overriding things, and that's true if I was at an assembly level, had it rolled up, went over here to the right, and said, you know, I need to make that $2 a square foot. So I can change either a unit cost at a high level, an amount. Now you'll notice both of my changes I've made are in the totals area. If I do that and the item has labor material to them, then it gets prorated proportionately. I can certainly come over here and just make a material adjustment as well. Couple other things too is if I come back here and roll this up, I also have, in addition to just manually entering things, I can come over here and say, you know, I really want to highlight that column, and I want to do an adjust column. And if I click on adjust column, I can do a fair amount of things with this other than just overwriting something. I can come in here and I can spread some money, which is kind of what I did manually there a minute ago. I can do it by percent. I can multiply. I can divide, replace, add some money to it. And if I don't like all my changes I made, I can undo and slide it right back to the way it is. What's also tied in with the whole adjustment capability is when you build up your estimate, you know, kind of your last piece is to go here to estimate totals or the summation bar here. And when I open that up, you can see here that there's all my numbers. Here's my add-ons, and there's my final price. You have the ability, it's kind of segued and tied in with adjust column, to be able to say, you know, what if we did the job, I think we can get it for $150. And now I can tell you there's a $22,000 variance. Like there's a command here that's tied in with the spread, with adjust column called spread variance. Say find, and I say spread it. And now it's just taken that money right out of the estimate, and it's all been prorated if I expand the spreadsheet. And again, that's called adjust column, and just allows me to make a lot of high-level adjustments as opposed to what I call working in the weeds and the details. So the other major difference too is that, and really this kind of segues in depending on which customers have certain databases that they possibly bought from Sage or a consultant, is if I come over here and just go into a different database and also a blank sheet, is we have what they call, if you notice in standard, you have really these options here, but this is grayed out and it's not available. Timberline allows you to go items, assemblies, and models. That's extended. And really they're just different ways to drive the spreadsheet, right? In standard or extended, you can come in here and open up the database, drag items, and generate assemblies. Modeling, think of modeling in a way, probably the best analogy would be an item might be a piece of sheetrock, an assembly might be the wall assembly and kind of the activities that would be present on a job. And then modeling would allow you to nest all those assemblies and items that go to a project. So in this case here, if I open up modeling, and when I said depending on the databases you may have purchased, there's a couple of them out there. One is the commercial knowledge base, which is what I'm showing. Mike Linebaugh, a lot of his general contracting databases have some assemblies. John Fredley, Advanced Assembly, has some models too. So you may have bought standard and bought a database, for example, that you only have access to items and assemblies, but if you turned on extended, you would have those models instantly available to you, depending on if those certain databases you purchased fell into those categories I just mentioned. If I double click on mixed use here as an example, what this is doing now is just using Timberline a little bit differently than traditional based items and assemblies. Think of, in a lot of ways, items and assemblies as kind of being, I call it in the trenches. I'm dealing with plans and doing takeoff. In this case here, what this is doing is, hey, I don't have a set of plans, and we're doing more design, build, budgeting. Maybe we're doing construction management type of work, CM services. But if you notice here, is now it's not things tied to a specific footing or a wall assembly. I'm answering more high-level things. You know, how many levels do we have? What's the perimeter look like? What's the slab or the the footprint? How many, what's the average square footage of the decks? And as I'm answering those questions, fundamentally keep in mind this modeling will now drive. So the best part, I can probably explain the depth it can drive, is that think about how far you can take a working drawing level estimate. And whatever level that is, because it varies between customers. If it's down to bill of materials or somewhere in between, that level of detail can be swept into these models. And as I answer the information, right, and this is just a good, and everything you see here is completely customizable, by the way, just like assemblies and items are. But it's not just give me how big, how tall, how many stories, but I can come in here and do a lot of value engineering. What if we, change the superstructure? If I came up here and what if we went wood frame? Well, now all of a sudden we don't need steel. We're swapping out all those assemblies and putting in the wood framed information. So it's a very good way, especially on those first few budgets, as you start evolving into working drawings, construction drawings. And now what happens is when I hit OK, it captures all that stuff. I hit close, and now I just generate that to the spreadsheet. Well, instead of having to go through all the items, all the assemblies manually, in a lot of cases I can't because I don't have a footing schedule or a wall schedule, I have the ability now to answer some parameter information. And think of modeling not just driving conceptual information. In a lot of ways, like when I was a project engineer using this application, I wasn't the expert estimator, but I knew Timberline, and these models can be organized in a way where it can almost guide people kind of through that process and really capture the best practices of a company, whether that's coming from the owner, senior estimator, so forth. But you'll notice I didn't have to go drag and drop these items. The model drove that information. And if I click on assemblies, same thing is true here. I didn't have to go find all these items or this assembly for that matter. And again, if I'm dealing more conceptually, I have the ability to roll here to the right and just start changing things and say, well, I think we can get away with $12 a square foot, or maybe we only need to make that $8, and it's prorating. So again, we're still working at a high level, but it's prorating that detail. So if we need to present that, we have all the depth as if we did a working drawing level takeoff. So the nice thing about the modeling, it kind of opens itself out in a way to really following that whole design build process, where I might have this budget, right, and then I would copy this estimate into another folder, okay? So and as I do that, I could go back to the model interview, because think of the model interview, if you had a line sheet of paper and you were just filling out the information about that project, and then as you copy it over, there's an audit trail that's both in standard and extended, but there's an additional part of the audit trail that comes into extended, and that's all the modeling. So it retains that questionnaire. So now I can go into that questionnaire and change the footprint, change the perimeter, go with a different skin of the building. And as I make those adjustments, now I have two estimates based on budget 1 and budget 2. Well, what that does is if you're using the copy estimate command and making those adjustments along the way for your different budget iterations, it really sets the stage now for being able to come in here. And I have a couple estimates here, budget 1 and a budget 2. And what it does is if I open this up back into this database, there's a couple other reports that are available to you and extended. One is a comparison report, which compares up to 10 estimates. Doesn't give you a delta, but it shows you kind of where you started, where you're at. Maybe you want to compare a few other kind of projects to the one you're doing to substantiate your new number. The variance report is really designed to be, take budget 1 and budget 2 down here, and it's just reaching into my library of estimates. Hit OK, and now what that does is it opens up, and I have the ability to save these reports just like you do in standard, but in this case, here's just the standard. I want to do a standard CSI report, and if I hit preview, you'll notice now it's comparing the CSI lines. That's not what I wanted to do. Bear with me. Hold on. Well, what it'll do is it'll compare two estimates side by side and show you a variance. And when it shows you the variance, you'll have the ability to see the delta at the high level as well as at the summary level. So if I open this up here again, run the report, you'll see there, the way I've got this structured is this is just the CSI, but all those different ways I can sort the spreadsheet by uniformat, by building location, maybe I want to compare different buildings, and the CSI or uniformat, all those different ways that I can sort and summarize information are available to me to run these variance reports. But in this case here is the CSI division. If I click on next, it goes down to the phase level, and if I go next or previous, it eventually gets all the way down to the items, comparing that information all the way down to the totals page and showing me the delta between budget 1 and budget 2. So again, I can look at that by variance, comparison, CSI, any definable codes. Another final thing that I'll say about the upgrade from standard to extended was what I said earlier about the crew information. If I come in here, there's a couple other reports that are turned on with extended. One is a crew report, another is a crew analysis report. And the nice thing about these reports is that if you're using the crew capability and you have those resource lists, it has the ability to look at the resources being used within the estimate and run a totals page showing you how many hours of carpenter is being used, how many hours of foreman is going to be out there based on your estimate, and so forth. So a couple other stragglers as it relates to standard to extended. You have the ability to have a product called Metricon, and Metricon can convert the estimate to a metric. You define the units that you have in the metric world, and you can run a conversion. And the other piece, which is you guys, whether you have standard or extended, there's a product you own called Estimating Tools. And Estimating Tools inside that, when you have extended, allows you to have the ability to set up a multi-currency database where you can have different currency schedules out there that can create that estimate if that's a need. Those are more of a kind of a setup thing, so I'm not going to really dive too deep into that right now. But those are a couple other things that go along with extended. I know I hit you with a lot of information in 40 minutes, but I think at this point, Tim, what I'd like to do is kind of open it up for questions, and I'll be happy to go to any part of the program if we need to. So go ahead, Tim, and if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just stop recording right now, and we'll go ahead and